My daughter-in-law looked me straight in the eyes, her lips tight, her voice low so the children wouldn't hear. "You don't belong at our Christmas dinner, Margaret." For a moment the world went silent. The lights on the tree blurred. The smell of cinnamon and pine suddenly felt foreign. I had baked the pies, wrapped the gifts, prayed all year to sit at that table. And yet, in my own son's house, I was being uninvited from Christmas. What Emily didn't know was that I had already made a decision that would change everything. I'm Margaret Wilson, and before everything broke apart, Christmas was the one thing I still believed in. That morning I stood alone in my small rented house on Maple Street, tying a red ribbon around a box of old ornaments. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that only comes after you've lost someone. My husband Robert used to hum Christmas hymns while making coffee. Now there was only the ticking clock and the soft hum of the heater fighting the winter cold. I picked up a glass ornament shaped like a bell. Robert bought it the year Daniel Akomse-Dallon was born. I smiled, pressing it gently into the box labelled Wilson Family Christmas. Daniel was my only son. I raised him in the same house he now owned, the house Emily would later call hers. After Robert passed away 5 years ago, Daniel insisted I sell my place and move closer. Emily smiled politely back then, tight smiles, the kind that don't reach the eyes. Still, I told myself I was imagining things. That afternoon, snow dusted the sidewalks as I walked to my car, my breath fogging the air. I wore the same blue coat Daniel bought me 2 Christmases ago. I remember Emily saying it wasn't my colour, but Daniel said it looked warm. That was Daniel, always trying to keep peace. When I pulled into their driveway, the house glowed with Christmas lights. White and gold. Elegant. Emily's choice. My old, colourful lights had disappeared years ago. Inside, Lily came running. "Grandma!" she squealed, hugging my legs. Behind her, Noah peeked shyly, holding a toy truck. My heart melted. Whatever tension lived between adults didn't exist in children. "Merry Christmas, my angels," I said, kneeling down. From the kitchen, I heard Emily's voice, calm, controlled. "They're here already?" Daniel stepped into the hallway, smiling nervously. "Mom, hey, you made it." I hugged him, holding on a second longer than usual. He smelled like the same pine soap he used as a teenager. Emily appeared moments later. Perfect hair, perfect sweater, perfect smile, the public kind. "Hi, Margaret," she said. No hug. "I brought the apple pie you like," I offered. She glanced at the box. "Oh, I already made dessert." The words weren't cruel, just dismissive. I followed them inside, noticing how everything had its place, and how none of it felt like mine anymore. The family photos on the wall were newer, mostly Emily's parents, their vacations, their smiles. Robert's photo was gone. That stung more than I expected. Dinner prep continued in silence. I tried helping, but Emily gently redirected me every time. "I've got it. No need. I prefer doing it this way." Finally, I sat at the kitchen table folding napkins, feeling smaller with every passing minute. That's when Emily spoke again. Not loud, but sharp enough to cut. "Margaret, can we talk privately?" Daniel looked up. "Everything okay?" Emily smiled. "Yes, just girl stuff." She led me to the hallway near the guest room. The room that used to be mine. She crossed her arms. And then she said it. "You don't belong at our Christmas dinner." I felt my chest tighten. What do you mean?" I asked. She sighed as if I were exhausting. "This holiday is about our family. Daniel, me, the kids. My parents are coming too. It's already crowded." I swallowed. "Daniel invited me." She lowered her voice. "And I'm asking you to understand boundaries. Boundaries. A word that erased decades of love in a single breath." From the dining room I heard Lily laugh. I realised then Christmas wasn't being taken from me. I was being erased. And that night, as I looked at Emily, I made a choice she never saw coming. I returned to the kitchen slowly, my legs feeling heavier than they had any right to. Emily walked ahead of me, her back straight, her steps confident, as if she hadn't just pushed a knife straight through my heart. The dining table was set beautifully. Gold placemats, white candles, plates arranged with perfect symmetry. It looked like a picture from a magazine, not like the Christmas dinners I used to host, where things were a little messy but full of laughter. Daniel was pouring drinks. When he saw my face, he paused. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked. I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to say, "Your wife just told me I don't belong here." But Lily tugged at my coat at that moment. "Grandma, sit next to me," she said, patting the chair beside her. Before I could answer, Emily spoke calmly from the other side of the table. "Actually, Lily, Grandma will be leaving soon. She just stopped by." The room went quiet. Daniel frowned. "Leaving? What are you talking about?" Emily didn't look at him. She adjusted Noah's napkin. "We talked. Margaret understands." All eyes turned to me. I felt my throat close. Years ago, Robert used to say, "Sometimes silence is the loudest scream." I understood that now. "Yes," I said softly. "I understand." Daniel stared at me confused. "Mom, we're about to eat." I forced a small smile. "I'm not very hungry." Emily finally looked at me, her expression unreadable. A warning, maybe. The children didn't understand, of course. Lily's face fell. "But Grandma, you always eat with us." "I know, sweetheart," I said, brushing her hair. "Not tonight." I stood up. My hands trembled as I picked up my coat. Daniel followed me into the hallway. "Mom? What's going on?" I could see the boy I raised in his eyes, the same boy who used to hide behind my legs on his first day of school. "Daniel," I said carefully, "this is Emily's home now." He shook his head. "It's our home, and you're my mother." Emily appeared behind him. "Daniel, please. Not in front of the kids." He turned to her. "What did you say to my mom?" She sighed dramatically. "I asked for space, that's all." Space. Another word that felt like rejection dressed up as politeness. "I should go," I said quietly. "Merry Christmas." Daniel grabbed my arm. "Mom, don't do this." I looked at him. Really looked. And saw the impossible position he was in. Choosing me meant conflict. Choosing her meant losing me slowly. "I love you," I said. "That hasn't changed." I bent down and hugged Lily and Noah. Lily held on tightly. "Will you come back tomorrow?" she whispered. I swallowed hard. "We'll see." Outside, the cold air hit my face like a slap. Snow crunched under my shoes as I walked to my car. Through the window, I could see Daniel standing still, Emily's hand on his arm, whispering something I couldn't hear. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time before turning the key. The drive home was a blur of lights and memories. Every street reminded me of a Christmas past. Daniel learning to ride a bike, Robert stringing lights too high on the ladder, burnt cookies and loud laughter. Now I was going home alone. When I reached my house, I didn't turn on the lights right away. I sat in the dark, listening to the silence. I placed the box of ornaments on the table. Robert's bell ornament slipped out and rolled across the floor. I picked it up and finally let myself cry. Not loud, just quiet tears. The kind you shed when you realize your place in someone's life has changed forever. My phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "Mom, please call me." I stared at the screen. Part of me wanted to explain everything. Another part was tired of explaining my worth. I typed back slowly. "I'm home. I'm okay. We'll talk later." I knew that wasn't true. I wasn't okay. But I also knew something else. Emily believed this was the end of my role in that family. She was wrong. That night, as I hung Robert's bell ornament on my own small tree, I made myself a promise. I would stop begging for a seat at a table where I wasn't wanted. And when the truth finally came out, It would be impossible to ignore. Christmas morning arrived without joy. I woke before sunrise, the house still and cold. For the first time in my life, I had nowhere to be. No dinner to prepare, no table waiting for me. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the faint glow of the streetlight through the curtains, wondering how something I'd cherished for decades could be taken from me so quietly. I made coffee and turned on the small radio in the kitchen. A Christmas song played, cheerful, almost mocking. I turned it off. On the counter sat my phone. No messages, no calls. I told myself not to check, but I did. Nothing from Daniel. That hurt more than Emily's words the night before. Around mid-morning, I wrapped myself in my blue coat and stepped outside. Snow had fallen overnight, covering everything in clean white. It reminded me of all the times Robert and I would take Daniel sledding. Back when family meant warmth, not politics. I decided to go for a walk, partly to clear my head, partly because staying inside felt unbearable. When I reached the park near my old neighborhood, memories flooded in. I sat on a bench and closed my eyes, thinking of Robert. He would have known what to say. He always did. "Stand tall, Maggie," he used to say. "You don't owe anyone your dignity." I was still sitting there when my phone rang. Daniel. I answered on the second ring. "Mum," he said, his voice strained. "Where are you?" "At the park," I replied. "The old one." There was a pause. "Can I come see you?" "Yes." 20 minutes later, Daniel arrived. He looked exhausted, the kind of tired that comes from emotional conflict, not lack of sleep. We sat side by side on the bench. For a while, neither of us spoke. Finally, he said, "Emily says she didn't mean it the way it sounded." I let out a slow breath. "And how did it sound to you, Daniel?" He rubbed his hands together. Like she didn't want you there." I nodded. "That's because she didn't." He swallowed hard. "She says she needs boundaries." "Boundaries don't erase people," I said gently. He looked away. "She said you make her feel judged." That surprised me. "Judged?" "Yes." "Like you don't approve of how she runs the house or raises the kids." My heart ached. "Daniel, I've never once told her how to run her home." "I know," he said quietly. "But Emily feels like you're always present. Present. As if being a grandmother were an inconvenience." "I raised you alone when your father worked 2 jobs," I said. "I know when to step back." He nodded slowly. "I believe you." That was the moment I realized something important. Daniel was starting to see the cracks, but he was scared of what would happen if he pushed too hard. Back at their house, Christmas morning wasn't what Emily had imagined either. I learned this later through small details Daniel let slip. Emily's parents arrived late. Her mother criticized the decorations. Her father complained about the food being cold. Lily asked 3 times why Grandma wasn't there. Emily snapped at Daniel when he mentioned calling me. "You're choosing her over me," she said. He told me that part with shame in his eyes. "I didn't choose anyone," he said. "I just said you're my mom." That afternoon, I went home and opened the box of old photo albums. Page after page of family memories stared back at me. Birthday cakes, school plays, Christmas mornings with wrapping paper everywhere. In every photo, I was there. And in none of them did I look like someone who didn't belong. That evening, Lily called me on Daniel's phone. "Grandma," she whispered, "Mommy's mad." "I know, sweetheart." "She says you hurt her feelings." I closed my eyes. Sometimes grown-ups get confused. "I miss you," Lily said. "I miss you too." After the call ended, I sat quietly for a long time. I wasn't angry anymore. I was sad, not just for myself, but for the children stuck in the middle of adult pride. I knew something had to change, but I also knew I couldn't force it. That night, I wrote a letter, not to Emily, but to myself. A reminder of who I was before I started questioning my worth. I folded it carefully and placed it beside Robert's bell ornament. Tomorrow I decided I would take my power back, not with anger, but with truth. The days after Christmas passed slowly, like time itself had lost direction. I kept busy the way widows learn to do, cleaning what was already clean, reorganizing drawers that didn't need it, making soup I barely ate. The quiet no longer shocked me, but it weighed on my chest all the same. Daniel didn't come by. He called, yes, short calls, careful calls. Emily's stressed, he'd say. The kids are adjusting. Things will calm down. I recognized the language. It was the language of a man trying to keep the peace while slowly losing himself. One afternoon, I went to the grocery store. As I reached for a can of cranberry sauce, I heard a familiar voice. Margaret. I turned to see Raful. Helensha, a neighbour from my old street. She smiled warmly and pulled me into a hug. We missed you at Christmas dinner, she said. I hesitated. Things change. She studied my face. Not all change is healthy. Her words stayed with me long after I returned home. That evening, Daniel showed up unannounced. He looked worse than he had at the park, dark circles under his eyes, shoulders slumped. He sat at my kitchen table like a child again, hands folded, unsure where to begin. She wants us to move, he said suddenly. I blinked. Move? Emily says starting fresh will fix things, he replied. New house, new rules. New rules. And what about me? I asked quietly. He looked down. She says, distance would help. I felt something inside me finally settle, not break, but harden. Daniel, I said, do you believe that? He didn't answer right away. Then, in a small voice, I don't know anymore. That was the truth he'd been avoiding. He told me how Emily monitored his calls, how she grew cold whenever my name came up, how she told the kids they were confused for missing me. She says you undermine her, he said, that you represent a past she can't control. Control. There it was. Emily didn't want boundaries. She wanted silence. I love my wife, Daniel said, but I feel like I'm slowly disappearing. I reached across the table and held his hand. That's what control does, sweetheart. It convinces you it's love. Tears welled in his eyes. I hadn't seen my son cry since Robert's funeral. Before he left, I said something I'd been holding back for weeks. I won't fight her, I said, but I won't beg either. That night, I made a decision. I called my lawyer, not to cause trouble, but to protect myself. Robert had left me more than memories. He'd left me investments Daniel didn't know about. Quiet savings. A safety net Emily had never considered. The next morning, Emily came by, alone. She stood in my doorway, arms crossed, expression tight. I think it's best if you take some time away, she said. I smiled politely. From my family? From interfering, she corrected. I nodded. Then you should know something. Her eyes narrowed. I won't be visiting for a while, I said calmly. But not because you asked. She hesitated. What do you mean? I mean I'm choosing peace, she scoffed. That's for the best. She turned to leave, clearly satisfied. She never noticed how steady my hands were. Emily believed she'd won. What she didn't realize was that control only works when the other person is afraid to walk away. And I had just walked away, on my own terms. The first week of my absence passed quietly. No visits, no phone calls from Emily, only short texts from Daniel. Polite, cautious, almost formal. Hope you're doing okay, Mom. Kids are busy with school, I replied kindly, never asking questions. I had learned that silence, when chosen, can be powerful. Inside Daniel and Emily's house, though, silence didn't bring peace. It amplified everything. Daniel later told me how Lily started leaving her chair empty at dinner. The one I used to sit in. She'd push it back carefully, as if saving it. Grandma will need it when she comes back, she said. Emily snapped. Grandma isn't coming back. The words landed hard. Noah began asking at bedtime, did Grandma do something bad? Emily told Daniel she was tired of being the villain. You let her control the narrative, she accused. Daniel didn't respond. He was starting to notice something he'd ignored for years. When Emily felt threatened, she didn't communicate. She erased. At my house, I filled my days differently. I volunteered at the community centre, reading to children who listened with wide eyes and unfiltered joy. No politics, no power struggles, just stories and warmth. One afternoon, Lily's school called me by accident. I was still listed as an emergency contact. Lily fell on the playground, the nurse said. She's okay, just shaken. I arrived before Daniel. Lily ran into my arms, sobbing. I thought you left forever, she whispered. I held her tightly. Never forever. Emily arrived minutes later. Her face hardened when she saw me. You weren't supposed to be called, she said sharply. I was listed, I replied calmly. The nurse looked uncomfortable. On the drive home, Lily held my hand and refused to let go. That night, Daniel called me. Mom, he said quietly, things aren't okay. Emily had accused him of going behind her back, of using the kids to guilt her. She says you're manipulating them, he told me. I laughed softly, not from humour, but disbelief. Children miss people they love. That's not manipulation. He was silent. Then he said, I don't recognise my home anymore. That broke something open. Over the next few weeks, Emily's control tightened. Curfews, rules, emotional ultimatums. You need to choose, she told him one night. Me or her influence. Daniel finally pushed back. She's my mother. And I'm your wife, Emily snapped. Yes, he said, but love doesn't require erasing people. Emily stormed out of the room. The children heard everything. When Daniel told me this, his voice was steady, different than before, stronger. I realised then, my absence hadn't weakened my place in that family. It had exposed the imbalance. One evening, Daniel came to my house with Lily and Noah. Emily didn't come. She said she needed space, he explained. Lily curled up beside me on the couch. Noah fell asleep with his head on my lap. For the first time in months, the house felt full again. Daniel watched us quietly. I forgot what this felt like, he said. I looked at my son. Really looked. You didn't forget, I said. You were just told to. That night, after the kids slept, Daniel told me something that changed everything. Emily had given him an ultimatum. If he didn't set permanent boundaries with me, she would take the kids and leave. I closed my eyes. This wasn't about Christmas anymore. This was about power. And Emily had underestimated one thing. I wasn't fighting her. I was standing still and letting the truth walk toward us on its own. The ultimatum didn't explode all at once. It burned slowly like a fuse Emily had lit weeks ago, waiting for Daniel to notice the smoke. The morning after Daniel told me about her threat, I woke with a familiar ache in my chest, not fear, but clarity. When you've lived long enough, you learn the difference. I made breakfast for Lily and Noah before school. Pancakes the way Robert used to make them, slightly uneven, edges crisp. Lily smiled for the first time in days. At the doorway, Daniel lingered. Mom, he said quietly, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I wiped my hands and looked at him. You don't have to choose sides. You have to choose honesty. He nodded, but I could see the weight on his shoulders. That evening, Daniel went home alone. Emily was waiting. He told me later how she sat at the kitchen table, arms crossed, phone face down like a gavel. Did you enjoy playing house with her? She asked. She's my mother, he replied. She's undermining me, Emily said sharply. The kids don't listen anymore. They compare everything to her. Daniel finally raised his voice. They compare because they feel safe with her. That was the wrong thing to say. Emily stood up so fast her chair fell backward. So that's it, she said. You've chosen. No, Daniel said. I'm refusing to erase someone I love. Emily's eyes filled with tears. But they weren't soft tears. They were angry ones. "If you don't fix this," she said, "I'll take the kids and go stay with my parents." Daniel felt the floor drop beneath him. "You'd use them as leverage?" he asked. She didn't answer. Silence can be louder than words. The next day, Lily called me from Daniel's phone. "Grandma," she whispered, "Mommy's packing." I closed my eyes. Emily left that afternoon with the kids. Daniel called me after they drove away. "I think I waited too long," he said, voice breaking. "You didn't fail," I told him. "You woke up." That night, Daniel stayed at my house. He slept in the guest room, the one that used to be his when he was a boy. In the quiet hours, he told me things he'd never said aloud. How Emily criticized his parenting in private. How she controlled finances to reduce stress. How she made him feel guilty for missing his own mother. "I thought love meant compromise," he said, "but I compromised myself." The next morning, Emily called him. She expected panic. Instead, she heard calm. "I want counselling," Daniel said. "And I want my mother respected." Emily laughed bitterly. "You're being dramatic." "No," he said, "I'm being honest." She hung up. Days passed. Emily stayed with her parents. The kids were confused. Lily cried at night. Noah regressed, clinging to Daniel whenever he saw him. I stayed where I was supposed to be. Supportive, steady, not interfering. And then something unexpected happened. Emily called me. Her voice was tight, controlled. "I think we should talk," she said. I agreed. We met at a cafe halfway between our houses. She looked tired, less polished, less certain. "I never meant to hurt the kids," she said quickly. I stirred my tea. "Intent doesn't erase impact," she bristled. "You make everything sound like a lesson." "No," I said gently. "I make it sound like experience." She finally looked at me, really looked. "I felt replaced," she admitted quietly. "By you." My heart softened, just a little. "I never wanted your place," I said. "I wanted mine." She nodded, but pride still stood between us. When she left, I knew this wasn't resolved, but it had shifted. Daniel wasn't silent anymore, and once silence is broken, control loses its grip. Counselling began on a grey Tuesday afternoon. Daniel asked me to come, not into the session itself, but to be nearby afterward. He said he needed grounding. I understood. When truth starts surfacing, people reach for what feels solid. Emily arrived late. I didn't see her at first, but Daniel told me later how she sat rigid in the chair, arms crossed, eyes scanning the room, like she was preparing for battle rather than healing. The counsellor, Dr. Karen Mills, asked simple questions at first. "How long have you felt unheard? When did the tension begin?" Emily spoke carefully, rehearsed, as if she'd told herself this story many times. "She's always been there," Emily said. "Margaret always present, always needed." Daniel frowned. "She's my mother." "And that's the problem," Emily snapped before she could stop herself. The room went quiet. Dr. Mills leaned forward. "What do you mean by that?" Emily hesitated. Then something shifted. Her voice cracked. "My mother wasn't like that," she said. Daniel blinked. "What do you mean?" Emily stared at the floor. "She wasn't warm. She didn't help. She criticized. Everything I did was wrong." For the first time, Daniel saw not control, but fear. "She told me once," Emily continued, "that if I ever depended on anyone, I'd lose myself." Dr. Mills nodded slowly. "So when you saw Daniel leaning on his mother," Emily's jaw tightened. "I panicked." She admitted that my presence reminded her of what she never had, and what she feared she could never live up to. She didn't just feel judged, Daniel told me later. She felt exposed. After the session, Daniel came outside where I waited. "She's scared," he said quietly. "Not cruel, scared." "I know," I replied. "Fear often wears sharp edges." That evening, Emily called me again. This time, she didn't sound defensive. I didn't know how to share him, she said. I closed my eyes. You didn't need to. Love isn't divided. It grows. There was a long pause. I don't know how to fix this, she admitted. You don't fix it all at once, I said. You start by not erasing people. The kids came back home that weekend. Lily ran to me like she was afraid I'd disappear again. I thought it was my fault, she whispered. I held her close. It never was. That night, Emily stood in the doorway watching us. She didn't interrupt. She didn't correct. She just watched. Later, Daniel told me she cried in the bathroom, quietly, so no one would hear. Change doesn't arrive with grand apologies. Sometimes it arrives with silence that finally listens. But not everything was healed. Trust doesn't rebuild itself overnight. Emily still struggled when the kids mentioned me. She still flinched when Daniel called, but the house no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt unsettled, and unsettled was better than controlled. A week later, Daniel invited me to dinner. Just us, he said. No pressure. When I arrived, Emily opened the door. Hi, Margaret, she said. No forced smile, no sharp edge. Hi, Emily. The table wasn't perfect. The food was simple. But Lily's chair was no longer empty. And for the first time in months, I felt something return. Not my place, but my presence. Still, one truth remained unspoken. The one Emily hadn't fully faced yet. And until she did, Christmas would never truly come back. As autumn faded into winter again, I felt it long before anyone said it out loud. Christmas was coming. The stores filled with lights and music. Radios played the same songs that once brought comfort and now stirred something heavier. Every red ribbon, every decorated window carried the quiet question no one dared ask. What would this Christmas be? Daniel mentioned it first, casually over the phone. Lily asked if you're coming for Christmas dinner, he said. I paused, holding the receiver tightly. And what did you tell her? That we'd talk about it together. Emily hadn't said my name yet, not directly. But I felt her tension through Daniel's careful tone. Fear doesn't vanish just because it's understood. Sometimes it waits, hoping circumstances will bend back in its favour. A week later, Emily came by with the kids to drop off some of Lily's old books she thought I might like. She lingered. I don't want a repeat of last year, she said finally. Neither did I. But the memory was still sharp, her voice calm and cutting. You don't belong at our Christmas dinner. I don't either, I replied honestly. She looked surprised. I mean, I continued, I don't want a performance, I want honesty. Emily sat down, folding her hands. I'm afraid, she admitted. Of me? Of losing control again, she said. I nodded. Control feels safe, until it costs you connection. She exhaled slowly as if letting go of something heavy. I didn't grow up with holidays like yours, she said. Mine were tense, quiet, conditional. I thought of Robert singing off-key, Daniel tearing wrapping paper too fast, the mess and noise and love. I didn't know how to fit into that, she continued, so I tried to manage it. Forcing joy never works, I said gently. She nodded. I know that now. Still, when Christmas Eve arrived, I wasn't invited. Not uninvited either. Just uncertain. Daniel called that night. She's not ready, he said. I understand, I replied, and I did. Understanding doesn't always mean agreeing, but it allows peace. Christmas morning, I woke early and sat by my tree, holding Robert's bell ornament in my hands. I whispered, I'm okay. And I was. Around noon, there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, Lily stood there in her coat, eyes bright. Grandma, she shouted. Behind her stood Daniel and Emily. I hope this isn't too late, Emily said quietly. I stepped aside, letting them in. No dramatic apology, no speech, just presence. We sat together in my small living room, sipping cocoa, opening simple gifts. Noah laughed. Lily sang a song she learned at school. Emily watched and didn't flinch. Later, as the children played, Emily turned to me. "I was wrong," she said simply. I nodded. "That happens to all of us," she swallowed. "I won't say it didn't happen. I won't pretend it didn't hurt you." That mattered more than an apology. As they left that evening, Emily paused at the door. "You belong," she said. Not at her table, but in the family. And for the first time since that painful night, I believed her. The days after that Christmas were quiet, but the echoes of the past lingered. Emily didn't suddenly change overnight. Some habits die slowly. But the walls that had once held tension between us were starting to shift. She no longer snapped at Daniel when I called. She allowed the children to talk about me without guilt. And when we were all together, she stayed in the room instead of hovering at the edges. One afternoon, Daniel and I sat in my living room after the kids had gone to school. "I think she's finally seeing herself," he said quietly. "How do you mean?" I asked, pouring tea. He leaned back. "Her mother wasn't warm either. She raised Emily to believe she had to control everything to survive." "I think this was never about you, Mom." I nodded slowly. I suspected as much. It was strange seeing Emily in a new light. The woman who once erased me wasn't cruel. She was afraid. Afraid of repeating patterns she couldn't escape. Later, Emily came over, unannounced. "I need to talk," she said. I gestured for her to sit. "I've been thinking about last year," she began. "About how I treated you, about the kids, about Daniel." I listened quietly. The room felt warm but tense. We both knew this wasn't about forgiveness yet. It was about understanding. "I never knew how to let people in," she admitted. "I thought if I controlled everything I could keep everyone happy, but I just hurt everyone instead." I smiled gently. Control never guarantees happiness. Love does. She exhaled a long, slow breath. "I want to try," she said. "I want to do better." The children's voices echoed from the other room. They were building a pillow fort. I peeked and saw Lily's laughter ringing through the house, Noah giggling uncontrollably. For a moment I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. Later, Daniel thanked me. "Mum, you did more than just stay away. You reminded Emily what family feels like." I smiled softly. Sometimes stepping back shows people the space they're trying to take from you. Weeks passed. Emily began letting go of old habits. She stopped micromanaging Daniel. She started listening. And slowly she began to let herself enjoy the holidays, without fear or resentment. One evening she shared something personal, the kind of story I never expected. "My mother, she was always distant," Emily said. "I thought controlling everything would prevent pain, but it just caused more." I nodded. "I understand." She looked at me, eyes glistening. "I see now why you stayed, why you didn't fight. You gave me a chance to see myself before I lost my family." That was the moment I realized the real battle had never been about Christmas, or pies, or where I sat at the table. It was about history repeating itself. And by standing firm, by being patient, I helped prevent it. That night, as I hung Robert's bell ornament on my small tree, I felt peace. Not just for myself, but for the entire family. The children would remember this Christmas: laughter, love, and presents, not conflict or silence. Emily's voice reached me from the doorway. "You're part of this family." "Always," I smiled. "And you're learning to let that be enough." For the first time, I realized the power of quiet strength. It was Christmas Eve again, exactly 1 year after Emily told me I didn't belong at their table. The house on Oakwood Street was glowing. Warm lights glimmered against the snow outside, and the faint scent of pine filled the air. But unlike the previous year, the tension that usually hovered over Emily's perfect decorations felt different, less sharp, softer, tentative, as if the walls themselves were breathing easier. Daniel stood in the hallway, looking at me with that familiar mix of concern and pride. "Mom," he said, Thank you for coming tonight, for everything. I smiled, feeling the weight of 12 months of careful steps and quiet patience. I wouldn't miss this, Daniel. Lily and Noah ran ahead, their laughter echoing in the hallway. The sound was a balm, softening even the sharp edges of the past. Emily appeared behind them, her hands folded nervously. She caught my eye and offered a small nod. No forced smiles, no tense rigidity, just acknowledgement. We all entered the living room together. The table was set with a balance of tradition and compromise. My old cookie tins lined the centre, mixed with the elegant place settings Emily preferred. Candles flickered softly, casting warm reflections in the eyes of my grandchildren. For a moment, I allowed myself to savour the scene. The family I had feared I'd lost, quietly rebuilding itself. Dinner began. Conversation flowed slowly at first, cautious like ice breaking underfoot. Daniel recounted a funny story from work. Lily chimed in with her new song from school. Noah chimed in with the wrong words, but perfect enthusiasm. Emily laughed. And then, the moment that would define everything, she looked at me and said, "Margaret, I'm sorry." The apology was small, almost swallowed by the chatter, but it carried weight. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't performative. It was sincere, the kind that comes after reflection, fear, and finally admitting truth. I reached across the table and touched her hand gently. "Thank you," I whispered. Daniel cleared his throat. "Mum, I want you to know, you belong here. Always." Lily squealed, "See, Mommy, Grandma told you." Emily smiled, but her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I see it now," she admitted. "I didn't just almost lose you. I almost lost myself trying to control everything." Her words made the room still, not awkward but quiet with significance. For months she had carried invisible burdens, fear, insecurity, and the memory of her own upbringing. Tonight she finally acknowledged them. Later, after dinner, the children opened gifts. Laughter rang through the house. Daniel helped Noah with a puzzle while Lily tugged at Emily to join a game of hide and seek. I watched from my chair, quietly observing. The observer of change, the keeper of history, and the witness of reconciliation. Emily approached me later carrying 2 cups of cocoa. "I was afraid," she confessed softly. "Afraid of losing control, of not being enough. But you never tried to fight me. You just let us see the truth." I took the cup and smiled. Sometimes giving people space to face themselves is more powerful than arguing. We sipped quietly, the room filled with the soft hum of a Christmas song on the radio. It wasn't perfection. There were no dramatic proclamations of love or forced hugs. But there was something stronger: respect, understanding, and the quiet rebuilding of trust. As the night wore on, Daniel stood and raised his glass. "To family," he said. "The messy, complicated, beautiful kind. The kind that survives misunderstandings, fear, and even harsh words." I raised my cup, and Emily mirrored me. Lily and Noah giggled and clinked their small mugs against ours. I felt Robert's presence in the memory of this moment, in the warmth, the laughter, and the fragile strength of love preserved and restored. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to feel completely at peace. The pain of last year still lingered in memory, but it no longer dictated our present. Emily had faced herself, Daniel had faced his fear of conflict, and I had held my ground without anger. The family, in all its complexity, had found its rhythm again. And as the fire crackled in the hearth and the snow fell silently outside, I realized, sometimes the most powerful part of family is not control, not perfection, but the courage to allow everyone to see the truth and still choose to stay. Tonight, Emily didn't just welcome me to her table, she welcomed herself. And in that, she allowed all of us to heal. The following morning, I woke early to the soft light filtering through the curtains. For the first time in over a year, There was no lingering tension in my chest, only warmth, quiet, and steady. I brewed a pot of coffee, listening to the faint hum of the heater, and allowed myself to reflect on the journey that had brought us here. I thought of Robert, of course, and how he would have smiled seeing this fragile piece. He always believed that family was worth holding together, even when it hurt. And I realized that even though he wasn't physically present, his lessons guided me through every moment of tension, every silent departure, every difficult conversation. Later, Daniel came by, carrying Lily and Noah on his shoulders. They tumbled into the house, laughing, spilling tiny hands full of wrapping paper and holiday treats. Emily followed, a quiet smile on her face, not the forced, tense smile from last year, but one that reflected acceptance, humility, and a willingness to try again. "Good morning," I said, smiling at the chaos of energy that filled my small home. The children squealed in delight and ran to hug me. "Grandma, we made breakfast," Lily announced proudly. Noah held up a plate of slightly burnt pancakes with a triumphant grin. Emily helped them set the table, moving beside me instead of apart. There was no tension in her posture, only a cautious ease that came from realizing that love cannot be managed or controlled, only nurtured. Daniel caught my eye from across the room. "Mom," he said softly, "thank you for everything. You never forced it. You never fought unnecessarily. You just let us find our way." I nodded, my throat tight. Sometimes, the best thing you can do for someone you love is to step back and let them see the truth themselves. Emily approached and placed her hand over mine. "I want you to know, Margaret," she said, her voice steady now. "I see you. I respect you. And you belong. Not just here, not just in Daniel's life, but in our family." Her words carried the weight of genuine understanding. It wasn't an apology for the past, but a recognition I had longed for and had, through patience and quiet strength, finally received. The children sat at the table and Emily called Daniel to help serve the breakfast. We laughed together as syrup spilled and pancakes flipped too high, landing on plates at odd angles. I thought about how Robert would have joined in, teasing Daniel about making a mess, and I smiled, feeling him in spirit. After breakfast, we gathered by the window to watch the snow fall. Lily placed her hand on mine. "Grandma, this is the best Christmas ever," she said. Noah nodded, already half asleep on Daniel's lap. I looked at Emily and Daniel standing together, hands intertwined, smiles genuine. I thought of the journey. The harsh words, the cold silences, the ultimatums, the absence, and I realized that every painful step had brought us here, to understanding, to reconciliation, to peace. "Family isn't about perfection," I said aloud, my voice calm. "It's about weathering storms, learning from mistakes, forgiving, and sometimes standing firm with love." Emily nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I understand that now," she said softly. We spent the rest of the day together, decorating my little living room tree with ornaments both old and new, sharing stories, baking cookies, and reading holiday tales aloud to the children. There were no sharp words, no unspoken tensions, only warmth, laughter, and presence. That night, as I tucked the children into bed, Lily whispered, "Grandma, you're my favorite." Noah added, "Me too." I hugged them close. "And you're mine," I whispered. Later, I sat quietly by my tree, holding Robert's bell ornament in my hand. The soft glow of the lights reflected in my eyes as I allowed myself to breathe fully, feeling a deep sense of completion. This Christmas, I thought, was not about who controlled the table or who had the last word. It was about connection, love, and the quiet courage to let truth lead the way. Emily joined me in the living room, carrying 2 mugs of cocoa. She handed one to me and we sipped together in companionable silence. No words were necessary. The year's struggles, the lessons learned, the boundaries respected, and the love reaffirmed were all understood between us. For the first time in what felt like forever, our family was whole. Not perfect, but whole. And that, I realized, was more than enough. Christmas had returned. Not because a seat at the table was given, but because hearts had finally found their way home.